Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in to another edition of Intuitive Angling here. And today we are going to have a discussion on how to catch bass if you've got slime or algae on the lake or on the bottom, which is extremely common this time of year in the springtime of the year. And the reason I wanted to do this video is I'm just coming back right now from an on-the-water lesson at Stockton Lake, and we had to deal with algae and moss on the bottom all day long. It was like we were picking it off the baits all day long. So I'm going to give you guys a sort of a little seminar on how it's going to help you guys catch more fish and what you can do about it. But it was pretty cool today at Stockton Lake. We caught all 4 species of bass on the lake. We caught largemouth, spotted bass, smallmouth, and meanmouth bass. It's pretty rare. I've only done that a couple times ever, catching all 4 species in one day. So that was a pretty good day, but beautiful April day, a little bit windy, fish biting pretty good today. So anyway, okay, let's get into this algae and moss deal. One of the things you're going to find, guys, is that algae and moss, grow a lot in the late winter and the springtime of the year. That's when you have to deal with it for the most part. Now, it can grow at any times of the year, but for the most part, that is when it seems to be the biggest pain in the butt to deal with it. Now, a lot of people think there's a couple misconceptions about this. There's several different types of moss and algae. Some of it is stringy, some of it's slimy. There's very different variations based upon, the nutrients entering the lake and the type of rock structures you have. But from my experience, the fish react, and the things that you can do to catch fish around is about the same anywhere. I'm going to say right off the bat is one of the biggest misconceptions about moss and algae on the bottom, where it's a pain in the butt, is a lot of people think that they need to be somewhere else and those fish aren't going to bite. The fish do not care if there's algae or moss on the bottom. I'm going to tell you guys right now, some of the biggest strings, the best days I've had in the water have been on nasty, mossy covered banks. So the first thing that you have to do is sort of get that out of your head, that if you're getting a lot of moss on your bait, that you need to get to a different area. That is not the case at all. Everybody, would prefer fishing a clean bottom where you didn't have to pick moss off, but don't let that stop you. Here's the thing that you have to remember is, like, from what my experience is in fishing a lot of moss and algae, is most of the time it grows on rocky bottoms, and the rocky bottoms can be anywhere between gravelly, or it can be boulder, basketball size rock, whatever. But it's on a rocky bottom, and normally, since it's in late winter and early spring, one of the top techniques that you fished it and under these conditions is a crankbait, and that's what we were catching our fish on today, is mainly a crankbait, some on a Ned rig, but mainly crankbait. And a lot of people, it's like the first time they get some moss or algae on their bait, on a crankbait, they put it down and they say, well, I need to pick up something like a swim bait or a jerk bait, to get this moss. Guys, that's a huge mistake. That's one of the worst mistakes that you can make, because when you've got moss on the bottom, one of the best lures you can throw to get the fish to bite is a crankbait. And today was a prime example. We ripped them on a crankbait, dealing with moss all day long. The thing that you have to do is, once you get familiar with how your crankbait's running and the bank angle, is try to keep your crankbait off the bottom just a little bit. One of the things I found out about late winter, early spring fish is that you don't have to be dredging and knocking that bottom hard all the time. Like today, I bet half the bass we caught today, the crankbait was above the moss. It was just like maybe 6 inches or a foot above the moss. We were intentionally trying to keep it above the moss, because those fish were sitting on those rocks and they were sitting on that moss, and they didn't have to have that bait digging into the rocks to get it. It's something as simple as they don't, if you've got moss all over the rocks, maybe the crawdads are not going to be as accessible as they normally are in tight spots around the rocks. And for whatever reason, if you can get that feel down for the crankbait, keep it just above the moss, you're going to catch a lot of fish. And obviously you're not going to be able to do that all the time, because we picked a lot of moss off today and we caught fish, when the bait was hitting rocks. So one of the things, though, you're not going to catch any fish if you've got moss on your bait. If you do, it's going to be a freak situation. So if you feel like you've lost your vibration with your crankbait, go ahead and reel it in. I don't care if you've got half your cast left, go ahead and reel it in and make another cast. When you're fishing algae and rocks with crankbaits, most of the bass are going to bite right before that crankbait hits the bottom, or when it very first touches the bottom. That's sort of the vibe on that. Now, sometimes, you know, you can get by with fishing different baits. Like today, you know, I tried a jerkbait quite a bit, trying to keep it above the moss. The fish were not keen on a jerkbait. The personality and the mood of the fish was not per jerkbait or swim baits. We did catch a few fish on a Ned rig. But the point of the video, guys, what I want to try to make here is when you get into an area that has moss or algae in it, one of the worst mistakes that you can make is trying to fish a bait that will come through that algae or not get algae or moss on it. You need to get down in close to that algae. Don't fish an area with algae or moss any different with your techniques than you would if it was a clean bottom. Just deal with picking it off. You know, it's a pain in the butt, and every cast you've got to do it, but that's just part of fishing around algae and moss. Now, a lot of times you can get out of it. Sometimes you may pull in one cove that's full of algae and moss, and you may go around to the next cove and there's not any. But most of the time, if you've got algae and moss, it's going to be pretty widespread through the portion of the lake that you're in. So anyway, like I said, give that a try, guys. Don't let algae and moss keep you away from fishing the baits that you need to. Stay with those baits. And another thing is that when you're dealing with getting moss on your hooks, guys, do not make the mistake of slapping your bait on the water like you see guys doing. That's going to spook the fish a lot of times. Take the time to put your bait in your hand and just pick it off with your hands. Make another cast. That's going to be quiet and stealthy, and it's just a good habit to get into. So anyway, hope that helps you guys catch some more fish. I know we all are dealing with moss and algae a lot this time of year, but like I said, you can still catch them on it because we did today. So anyway, thanks for tuning in the video, guys. Much appreciated. And I'm heading back to get Elijah. We'll talk to you later.